Right, thank you, Sean. And I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to our second public meeting this afternoon. And we had a land acknowledgement done in our very first meeting, so we'll bypass that. I'll go directly to members of council. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda as presented to you? All right, none declared. And the introduction and purpose of our meeting is to hear public comment on a zoning bylaw amendment application has been submitted for a 20.68 hectare, 51.1 acre parcel of land situated on the east side of Holden Road, approximately 1.1 kilometers north of its intersection with County Road 8, also known as 6780 Holden Road. The purpose of the application is to amend the zoning bylaw 85-15 by one, rezoning the 0.55 hectares of 1.35 acre non-farm related residential lot, 6780 Holden Road, from agricultural zone A to a site specific agricultural zone A-37 in order to establish a maximum lot area of 0.55 hectares or 1.35 acres. And two, rezoning the 20.13 hectare, 49.7 acre agricultural parcel from agricultural zone A to a site specific agricultural zone A-38 in order to prohibit a residential dwelling from being constructed. So I'll call upon our manager of planning services to summarize the report and recommendations. So Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Attachment 1, please. So the property that the mayor just described is depicted here on attachment 1. See, it's outlined in red. It's on the east side of Holden Road, just about 1.1 kilometers north of the intersection with County Road 8. Back in February of this year, the Committee of Adjustment granted provisional consent for a surplus dwelling lot from this property. And that scenario is depicted on attachment 2. So that decision was granted subject to certain conditions being met, and one of which was to rezone, as the mayor noted, rezone the severed parcel to address the oversized residential lot and agricultural area, because the maximum size is 0.5 hectares, and that's 0.51 hectares there outlined in red. And then the more significant condition was to rezone the retained farm parcel outlined in green to prohibit a residential dwelling from being constructed on that farm parcel. And that's in accordance with the policy direction of the provincial policy statement, as well as the county official plan and our own official plan, the town's Tecumseh official plan through subsection 6.4.1c, which states that a consent may be granted to permit a surplus dwelling lot as a result of the acquisition of additional farm property, provided that the lot is not greater than 0.5 hectares in area, except where natural or man-made features dictate otherwise, and that's the case here. There are some man-made features, the buildings, that dictate the size of the lot. And then secondly, that as a condition of the consent, the retained farm parcel will be rezoned to prohibit a dwelling. So that's what is before council tonight at this public meeting. It's to hear any comments from interested stakeholders on the proposed amendments that would facilitate the severance of the proposed surplus dwelling lot. Again, Mr. Mayor, if there are any issues that need further attention resulting from tonight's public meeting, we will come back with a follow-up report to council and a draft zoning bylaw amendment. Otherwise, we will bring back a draft zoning bylaw to council at a future council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jeffrey. To members of council, any questions to Mr. Jeffries on the said purpose and requirements? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Chad. Chad, outlined in the report, as you just had mentioned, it does state what some of the criteria are in order to sever the lot. I could not see the criteria of size.
Yep.
What what size or what is the minimum lot size or farm parcel allowed to be severed? Is there a minimum size that the parcel has to be before severance of that size could be granted? I just didn't see that here in the report.
Oh, you're muted.
My apologies. Yeah, the minimum lot size for the farm parcel is 20 hectares, and it's met by this proposal. There's a maximum size for the proposed surplus dwelling lot, and that's 0.5 hectares, and this one exceeds it. So we are incorporating that provision into the proposed zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, thank you. And secondary to that, you had mentioned other farm parcels or the additional farmland in the criteria. So I just want to understand the criteria of this, because it comes up from now and then, but just as long as it would be 20 hectares. But can you explain that additional farmland piece that you mentioned?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of the surplus dwelling lot policy is to allow for a farming operation to grow, for a farmer to acquire additional lands without the need to become a landlord. So there's provisions to allow that dwelling, that if there's a farm parcel that's acquired and there's a dwelling on it, there's provisions to allow for that dwelling to be severed, to avoid the need for the farmer to become a landlord and just to focus on growing the farming operation. Back in 2005, the provincial policy statement was amended to remove a number of other types of land severances, including retirement lots. And there was discussion to eliminate the surplus dwelling lot. And the reason they were doing that at that time was because they found that the policies were getting abused, and there were far too many non-farm related residential lots being created that didn't meet the intent of the provincial policy statement at the time. So they removed most of the opportunities for residential lot creation in the agricultural area, but kept the surplus dwelling lot policies and allowed for them to continue subject to this rezoning condition to prohibit a dwelling from being constructed on the retained farm parcel.
Okay.
But the condition, that the main criterion to be met is that there's an expansion of the farming operations. You have to have more than one farm parcel and consolidate that into your operation before you can take advantage of the surplus dwelling lot policies.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Jobin.
Thank you. And through you, first, I do apologize. Everyone here in the home knows I'm in a meeting and they have to ask me if we have juice in the fridge. So I was scolding my children for interrupting. So my apologies. Secondly, Mr. Mayo, thank you for joining us this evening and for the application and welcoming you to the area. I do have to ask some questions though, based upon some area residents who have been longtime residents, longtime farmers, generational farmers in the area, and they have sought out to get a surplus dwelling severance and aren't able. And they have in the range of 100 to 150 acres within the area that they have farmed. Like I said, generational, it's been in their farm for 100 years. And they're reaching the age where they can continue to farm the land for 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, but they don't want to reside in the 2,000, 4,000 square foot, 2-story farmhouse, and they want to downsize. We are tying them to that home and not allowing them to sever. And I don't know if Mr. Mayo, I'm not familiar with him being a longtime farmer in our community, which is totally fine. I'm happy this is happening for you. But again, and I'm surprised these residents aren't delegations this evening inquiring of this. So I'm just saying, I understand the policy. The other residents understand the policy, but it is not beneficial at all in any way to our historical, local, long-term farming families. It's not fair for our aging farming families where the house doesn't want to be a generational intake. The new wife wants to stay, the children want to stay in the city, so they don't want to take on the home, but they want to farm the land, or it's not efficient and effective for our long-term farmers who have been here. I don't know what the options are for them, but like I'm saying, it's making it easier for other people to come in and do it and not for our long-term people who have been doing it for centuries.
I can't answer, that, but I know that the province was pretty adamant in terms of, and back in 2005, in terms of severing properties. At one time, if you had, mom and dad and then 5 kids, you could sever 5, 6 lots and then, build at that time. And then there was, I think, a grandfathering for about a year, I think it was at that time. And if you didn't take advantage of it, then it shut down. But I think the biggest push, and I remember when we went through that with the county at the time, was they wanted to aggregate the farms or farmland, make them bigger and not necessarily smaller and so forth. But you do provide a good point, Councillor Job, and somebody farmed for 100 years and they want to, maybe at the time they want to retire, from farming, but they want to be able to downsize their home and so forth. So, I think that could have been a misstep from the provincial policy statement back in the day, and so forth. But I certainly don't have a good answer for you. And I don't know, Mr. Jeffries, in those terms, but I think, the policy back in the day was more of, they wanted to grow the acreage, not lower it at the time. So anyway, here we are today, it's kind of beyond our scope. It's now the province that kind of drives the ship here. Mr. Jeffrey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to note, I believe what Councillor Jobin is talking about is the retirement lot policy, where you've farmed all your life and it's come time for retirement. And there used to be provisions to allow for a lot to be severed, a vacant lot or an existing dwelling to be severed for that purpose. And as I noted earlier, that opportunity has been removed because it's the role of planning and the Ministry of Agriculture to protect the resource and to encourage flexibility in farming operations. And it was just felt at the time that the retirement lot policy was being abused, and there were far too many lots being created that didn't quite meet the intent of that policy, and that's why it was removed. And you're right, we have to conform to the provincial policy statement. Any decision that's made by council must be consistent with that policy statement. And that's why our documents allow for surplus dwelling lots, but they don't allow for retirement lots.
Councillor Tobin?
No, thank you. I understand that. It's not looking for the retirement lot. He's looking for a surplus dwelling. He wants to live just around the corner in a smaller residential, maybe even the apartments over in LaSalle, so he can still come over and farm. There's still a barn there. He still wants to get the income off of the agriculture, but he also, like a surplus dwelling, he does not want to be a landlord of the house that he would be vacating. So his other option would be just that, to go against the surplus definition. And he who has been a historical long-time farmer, he will have to become a landlord to downsize into a smaller livable space and then still farm the land. So it's flipping on the side of not favoring the historical agricultural farmer. This is, I know we are in a moment of making decision, but again, Mr. Mayo, this is more for conversation, as I know some other residents who have tried. They are most likely watching tonight, and this was something they've wanted to bring up for discussion. And this is what I'm doing, and we should have more discussion again, maybe in the planning department and see. And I can tell you other municipalities, I've seen them doing this in different, not as strict or as firm as what the policy that we are complying with. Anyway, we should have other discussions, but on this application and process, I'm okay with what's before us this evening.
All right, thank you, Councillor Tobin. Councillor Tonio?
Thank you, and to you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Jeffries. So what I'm understanding is the residential lot that's going to be retained is a little bit bigger than what the provincial policy allows. Is that correct?
It's partly correct, through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Tennille. It's the surplus dwelling lot that's going to be severed and has to be conveyed to someone other than the applicant. So it has to be conveyed to someone other than Mr. Mayo. It's 0.5 hectares larger than the 0.5 hectare maximum for residential lots.
And that's because the current structures of buildings and all that circumference that area. Okay, thank you very
Correct,
much.
through Mr. Mayor. It's to accommodate the setbacks for those buildings.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship, and through you, perhaps to administration. I appreciate the points that Councillor Jobins brought forth, and I guess this case here, it seems that we're following provincial policy, and we're doing, I guess, what we should. But she raises a few other very good points. And I'm just wondering, can this be a catalyst for a bit of a spark or genesis for perhaps some other discussions or communications that should take place to deal with, some other applications from other issues, which, are generally pretty legitimate and I think are in a general fair and good spirit. But unfortunately, because of, whatever reasons, they cannot fly. I guess I have a bit of an issue with that. And I know that's beyond the scope of perhaps what we need to be discussing today, but I just leave this perhaps maybe as like I said, the genesis for some other discussions that should happen so that, we can do the best thing for the best interests of our residents. But yet still, doing the right things according to the policy, the provincial policy standards. So I would appreciate that. And I'm sorry, I'm probably not the most up to date on all those points, but I think those discussions, given what I've heard tonight, are certainly warranted or should start at least. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Okay. I don't know if there's any questions to Mr. Mayo. I know you're here for just to get if there's any questions directly to you, but I don't believe there are any. Yes, Deputy Mayor Bichetti.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayo, for coming and also for winning the award for Family Business of the Year. I believe your name looks familiar in the Award of Excellence coming up. So congratulations on that. Just in terms of residents, is that your property, or are you on behalf of an applicant or a resident that's coming this evening, or do you actually live on Holden?
That is property which is owned by myself and my wife. And we started a formal farming operation about 3 years ago. I was born and raised on a farm. And now that I'm reaching retirement age from my engineering practice, this is what we're going to try to do for the next few years. Perhaps create something also for my grandchildren. So we're looking to accumulate a number of farms in the area, and we're going to be farming it. And the reason we want to get rid of the house is because it ties up our capital needlessly, where we could use that capital in buying hopefully some more farmland, simply because if you don't reach a critical mass of enough acres, it's very difficult to turn a profit being a farmer. So those are the reasons why we apply for the severance.
Okay, thank you. And I think that goes back to Councillor Jobin's point where, as farmers, whether or not to basically be able to do what you're doing tonight requires an assembly of land to have enough acreage to be able to sever. So I agree with the previous speakers in terms of exploring other options. And but again, on tonight's application, I'm fine with and support the recommendation that's outlined.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, then If I could have to receive the report that's presented to us, that report DS 2022-10 entitled zoning bylaw amendment, the condition of consent application, BO 122-6780 Holden Road, scheduling a public meeting be received. Deputy Mayor Buchetti and Councilor Jobin. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. And also, well, that was done. All right, if there's no further questions or comments to admin or Mr. Mayo, then adjournment is in order. Councilor Altenhoff, Councilor Houston, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Mayo.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Administration. Thank you. Okay, members, we've got about 37 minutes before